Hey, I'm Kai, and in this video I'm going to do a much deeper dive into the Hotone Ampero II Stomp. This pedal is currently on loan to me from Music Psych UK. There's an affiliate link in the description box, but this video is not otherwise sponsored by Hotone in any way. I have spent a good amount of time with this unit while I've had it. I've done 6 different videos so far covering it with real pedals, through a real power amp and cabinet, straight into the desk, as well as in 4-cable method with one of my tube amps. This one's definitely going to be a bulky video, so I'll leave timestamps in the description box down below so that you can skip around to the chapters that best suit you. I'm also going to try and break things up a bit and put some presets between each of the different sections of the video, just to keep things exciting. These are all going to be my own presets that I've created for the unit. I'll give you a very quick overview as to what the Ampero II Stomp is. This is from Hotone's Ampero line, which is a line of guitar modelers and multi-effects units. This one in particular currently retails for £399 here in the UK. There are a ton of different ways that you can run this pedal, as I alluded to previously, but for this video I'm running my guitar straight into the guitar input, and then I'm coming out from the stereo output into my interface. Before I get any deeper into this unit, I'm going to throw some B-roll up on screen and let you hear this one in the context of a full mix. All the guitars and bass tones are running through the Ampero. I'll touch on my first impressions in this video, however I did do a full first impressions run through of the unit the day I got it. Now generally this pedal is very easy to use. I got up and running with it instantly, just everything felt so intuitive and so easy, largely attributed to the fact that it's got a touchscreen. Anyone who is familiar with a smartphone or iPad or anything like that will be right at home on this unit because everything just works exactly as you'd expect it to. The unit is also a really nice size. It's got everything you need and nothing you don't. I would have liked to have seen a slightly larger touchscreen on this or a more optimized UI because some of the icons can be a little bit small for fat fingers, but ultimately that's not a major issue at all. I won't be demoing them in this video, but this pedal does also have a drum machine and a looper. I know that's something that a lot of people ask about with these units, but it's not something I'm personally interested in, so I won't be showing them off here. I'm now going to dive into an overview and the sort of core features of this unit. To guide you through the front face of the pedal, I'll switch over to the pedal cam and run you through that. We have a volume knob which controls your overall output. We have a menu knob that lets you select the different things in your effects chain. Then if you select the edit menu, you can access the 3 different parameter knobs. These have different pages for each effect. We also have 3 foot switches that you can assign to do multiple different things, such as scene controllers, effects bypass, or presets and banks. There's also a lock button on the front of the unit if you would like to lock the touchscreen. This can be particularly helpful in live situations. Personally, I don't really find myself using the menu knob all that often. It's really just there if you don't want to use the touchscreen, but I find myself flicking around the touchscreen quite nicely. Also, if we hop over to the pedal camera again a second, you can use the rotary encoder to change the effect, or you can use your finger to tap and swipe. I personally prefer to use a rotary encoder because it gives you a much more fine granular control. Also, if you're swiping with your finger, you're probably not going to be able to see what's underneath it, so it's much easier just to use the parameter control instead. Now we'll hop over and talk about the desktop editor. I really love the desktop editor that Hotone use for their stuff. It's a lot better than a lot of other products' desktop editors that I've tried. One of the main things that I like about it, that I found particularly frustrating about the Line 6 editor for instance, is that it's got access to the global settings, so you can basically access every single thing on the unit just from this desktop editor. If I click through some of the models as well, you can see that it's got a full description of every single one of them, telling you what they are, what they're based on, and how to use them. It's not perfect, but I'll get into some of the cons of the desktop editor later on in the video. Let's also go through a quick overview of the inputs and outputs available on this unit. You have a stereo input, a stereo output, both of these are 1/4 inch. You have a stereo effects loop, which is going to be through TRS cables. You have a 3.5mm aux in, 3.5mm headphone output. You have a 9V 800 milliamp power requirement, full MIDI in and MIDI out support, as well as a USB-C port for use with the desktop editor or to use as an audio interface. I'd say the 800 milliamp requirement for this pedal is pretty great considering that it's got a touchscreen. This makes it kind of pedalboard friendly. You'll probably need to jumper together a few outputs on something like a Chox power supply, but it does free up a lot for other pedals you'd like on your board. One thing the Ampero II Stomp has really got nailed is the effects routing. You're able to run so many different configurations of your chain to really best suit your needs. You can run a parallel path if you'd like to run 2 guitars through it. You can run a serial path if you'd like to take advantage of all of the blocks. You can do a Y to AB split or an AB to Y split, all sorts of different things that lets you really make the most of the unit. There's also the option in the global settings to disable the cabinet on just one of the outputs. This is particularly useful if you're going to be using this unit live, as you can send one output with a cabinet or impulse response on it out to front of house, and the cabless signal out to a power amp and cabinet. I did have a couple of squirrely little issues running it with the global cab bypass, especially when I was using the desktop editor. However, hopefully this is something they're able to fix in a future firmware update. So rather than building a patch from scratch in what's already going to be a fairly long video, I'm just going to run through the all-in-one preset I did for a previous video. This patch has 4 different tones available, 3 through the scenes and then 1 through the foot switch. This is clean, crunch, high gain and then lead. Most of this preset takes advantage of what's called the scenes functionality. This is sort of taken from the Line 6 Helix line with their snapshots or the fractal scenes. This kind of means that you've got a sort of preset within a preset. Scene controllers let you change the bypass state of each block as well as the parameters and let you switch between them all seamlessly. This is actually a good time to mention a minor limitation. This unit only has 3 scenes, so if you were hoping to add an external foot switch for instance and unlock scenes 4 and 5, that's not going to be possible with this at this time. Okay, let's run through this preset. The first scene is my clean scene. The second scene is going to be a crunchy sort of thing. The third scene in this preset is high gain and dry. The fourth scene, which I'm going to access by turning on the foot switch, is going to be a boost, a delay and reverb over that high gain tone. I do think overall this unit sounds pretty great. I think my main issue is going to be the amp models. They feel more like captures than actual amp models like you'd get in something like the Fractal or the Line 6 for instance. I said this about a year ago when I tried out the Ampero Mini, and now that Hotone are announcing their own amp capture technology, I'm starting to believe this even more. The gain and EQ sweeps in the amp's parameters don't really react like a real gain and EQ on an amplifier, and a lot of the amps they've captured don't sound realistic at all the different settings. If it is amp capturing though, it is realistic amp capturing. When you get it into the settings that it was captured at, it does sound really nice. One thing I get asked about a lot when I try out budget modelers is how good is the pitch shifting. So this is something I've set up a specific patch for, so we can try that out through a clean tone and a dirty tone. Let's first hear my clean tone. Now let's pitch shift that down to semitones. Now, I don't know if that's sounding better on the recording, but in the room, I'm not enjoying that too much. Let's try it out through a dirty tone and see if that makes it any better. So again, here's my dry tone. Now with the pitch shift down to semitones. I'm also going to try it again on a sort of leady sort of lick. Okay, so let me know what you thought of that one in the comment section down below. I should say the latency on the pitch shifting isn't too bad at all. This is something where the more budget units start to really fall apart a lot of the time, so I'm glad to say that this isn't too much of an issue here. Okay, so before I dive into the pros and cons of the unit, I want to quickly say if you're enjoying this video, please drop me a subscribe, drop a like, drop a comment letting me know what you think. All that good stuff goes a long way towards helping me out. So let's wrap this up into some pros and cons. We'll start with the pros. This is a very intuitive unit, it's very user-friendly, and I think the touchscreen does play a huge role there. Unlike a lot of other digital modelers, you probably won't ever need to touch the user manual for this one. Everything just comes so naturally, so fast, just super easy to use. A major pro, especially at this price point, is that this pedal has near gapless switching between presets, between scenes, between turning effects on and off. You don't ever really notice it, and that's something that not a lot of people talk about when they talk about this unit. I measured it to be something like 23 milliseconds or so, which is almost imperceptible. I really like that this pedal has the ability to auto-match cabinets. This means that when you're cycling through the amp list, it'll automatically pick a suitable cabinet. For instance, if you pick something like a Vox AC30, the auto cab match, which you can disable by the way, will pick you a 2x12 with blue speakers, while if you pick something like the JCM 800, it will pair it up with a UK 4x12. While there are issues with the global cab bypass, I do really like that it's in there. You can take your same preset that you'd use directly into front of house or into your interface and just disable the cabinets and run it into a power amp and cab, or you can take it live and run half out to a power amp and cab and half out with the cabinet enabled out to front of house. The routing options on this unit are incredibly diverse and will have you covered for 99.9% of scenarios. I think the only thing I believe that it's missing would be the triple parallel paths where you can run a dry signal through your delays and reverbs separate from each other, but this is a feature that I've only ever seen on the Fractal units. Even the Line 6 Helix doesn't have this. As I mentioned, the desktop editor with the Ampero II is one of the absolute best that I've tried. It's easy to use, it's all laid out nicely, everything works as you'd expect it to, and the absolute clutch feature is those descriptions. That's just such a nice touch. The Ampero II Stomp also comes stock with some Celestion IRs. While the stock cabinets are pretty good, considering you can swap around the microphones, you can swap the placement and all that sort of stuff, the Celestion IRs that come bundled are just that little notch above in quality. Also, while we're talking about blocks, the available amps, cabinets and effects and stuff like that, it's a really nice list for this one. It's almost on par with something like the Helix, but not quite there. The last pro that I want to mention is that the DSP on this unit is fantastic. It's extremely rare that I'll hit the DSP limit, and I'll normally hit the block limit of 12 blocks first. There are some weird, strange exceptions to that, such as the high quality delays, high quality reverb options, but these are fairly few and far between. Now, unfortunately, it's time to talk about some of the cons of this unit. I'm going to start with the hardware cons, the sort of fundamental flaws that are unlikely to be able to be changed. As mentioned, generally the size of the unit feels pretty good, but the touchscreen can be a little bit of an issue given that it's quite small. I don't know if this is just the tolerances for this specific unit, or if this is an issue across the whole Ampero II Stomp range, but the TRS jack for the effects loop is incredibly tight, really hard to get a jack in there. Finally, for the hardware cons, the power supply squealing is something of a major issue, though it only affects people based in the UK. I replaced mine with a £10 power supply from Sonic Ache instead, and it's been silent as anything, so I'd say this is something that they should fix, but also something that's not that bad. Onto the firmware cons though, this is where things start to get a lot more subjective, and also everything's sort of subject to change as they could release a firmware update that changes every single one of these. I think the foot switch customization on the Ampero II Stomp could be taken quite a lot further. Fractal have really nailed this, for instance. You have one press to turn on your scene 1, one press to turn on your scene 2, and then a third press and hold to do a third action, something like changing preset, for instance. This means that with 3 buttons you can access 6 different scenes, as well as banking up and banking down. Also, not being able to assign multiple effects to external foot switches is incredibly frustrating, and it kind of ruined my all-in-one preset build. It would be so much easier if they just added more scenes so that you could assign them to external foot switches. I think the most major firmware issue, for me at least, is that a lot of blocks are missing parameters you'd expect to see. So all of the modulation blocks, for instance, I'd love to have a mono to stereo switch, because some of the choruses get super cheesy in stereo, but they would sound great in mono. I also think that everything needs an output parameter. Master volumes will typically affect the tightness and the sag of an amp, while the overall output level is just there for volume leveling purposes for your preset. I think if every block had an output level available, it would help to keep everything at unity gain. There's a few minor issues with the editor as well, so if I go into the cabinet section, swap out for an impulse response, and then scroll down to my user IRs, you can see that a lot of the names are just cut off halfway through and you can't really tell what they're doing. I wish these sort of scrolled so that you could see the whole thing. Speaking of IRs as well, loading them is incredibly frustrating in this unit. You don't have that many IR slots, but you do have to load them one at a time, which is so slow. I wish there was some sort of batch import available. As I mentioned previously, I had issues with the global cab bypass when I was using the desktop editor. It would frequently switch sides as to which one was bypassed and which one was active. It would turn itself off based on the blocks that I had after it, and it was generally just incredibly inconsistent. I also had a few crashes of the desktop editor while I was doing this, so maybe it could just be an incompatibility with my macOS that I'm using. Similarly, the routing options were pretty inconsistent when I was using the click and drag features, so I had to use the layers tab instead, which wasn't really that much of an issue, just a strange thing that I needed a workaround for. Now, the scenes feature is a very useful functionality, however I think it needs something like the Line 6 Helix has got, where you have indications on what parameters are being affected by the scenes. Being able to delink parameters from a scene would be particularly useful for something like a reverb, for instance. I don't want to have to go through every single scene and turn the reverb mix down by 5%. While the auto cab feature is a nice addition to have, I think they could have done with a little bit more fine tuning on this, and changed the microphones as well. Currently it just defaults to an SM57 in the center of the speaker. I would have liked to have seen this more closely matched to what you'd expect with that cabinet. I would have liked to have seen the stock presets take advantage of the scenes functionality. I know this is a fairly new thing that was added with an update, and it would require rebuilding most of the scenes available, but this is something that kind of feels like it was just put by the wayside. As far as I can tell, none of the factory presets are controlled via the scenes. However, this is kind of difficult to tell because you can't rename the scenes, so they're all just scene 1, scene 2, and scene 3. Finally, for the cons of the firmware, this is something that doesn't affect me, but I have seen other people mention it. The MIDI sends are not programmable, so that's something that really should be amended in a future update. So in conclusion, I'd say most of the cons of this unit are fairly minor. At this price point, the Ampero II Stomp is up against the Mua GE1000, the Line 6 Podgo, and the Boss GX100. It holds its own for sure. It's more comparable to something like the Line 6 HX Stomp, which is considerably more expensive, at least here in the UK. Of course, there are some issues with this unit, but there are also so many things that they've nailed. This is really a sort of Apple versus Android type of conversation. While something like the Line 6 Helix just works like Apple, the Hotone has more power but less of that compatibility. Also, when the Ampero II Stomp gets the rumoured amp capture block, then it will definitely be a force to be reckoned with. But, you know, don't buy something based on the features that they said they're going to add. So thank you so much for watching this video, thank you for sticking around to the end. I know it's been a long one and I do really appreciate it. There's going to be a link up on screen to another one of my Ampero II Stomp videos if you'd like to check that out. Don't forget, if you wanted to purchase this pedal for yourself, there'll be a link in the description box down below. This is my affiliate link where I get a little bit of a kickback. That's everything I've got for this video though, so thank you for watching. I've been Kai.